It's John Lone King, and welcome to my next episode of From Profits to Properties, where I give you tactics to help build your business to grow more profits, and then topics to help you to build wealth long-term through real estate, through investing in rental properties, or just buying a primary residence for yourself. So today's episode, we're going to cover two really big topics. The first one is, are you addicted to urgency? And what does that mean to your business? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? And the second one is property types explained. Why do we care whether it's a condominium or a townhome or a manufactured home? And are there pros and cons to buying different types of properties? So I'm going to cover that in the second segment. So if you want to hang tight, we're going to get to that information. We're going to start first with the urgency addiction. So if you're a reader, there is a book that I was given, like 30 years ago. And it is called First Things First from Stephen Covey. And he talks about the urgency addiction in that book. And it's something that stuck with me for a really, really long time. So if you haven't read the book, or if you don't know anything about the book, Google it. If you're using AI, get a summary of it using AI. It'll give you a good idea of what it is. But essentially, the urgency addiction is about people who are focused on only things at the time in which they are urgent. And it breaks all of our tasks down to 4 quadrants. So your quadrants are things that are urgent or not urgent, and then things that are important or not important. And so everything fits into one of those 4 quadrants. It's either urgent and important, not urgent and not important, or one and not the other. So think about that as a matrix with 4 quadrants, and you put everything into one of those 4 quadrants. People who are addicted to urgency focus on the first quadrant. They focus their entire day on frantic activities that have to happen that day because somebody's upset. Now they'll spin it to a positive, saying, I work well under pressure. I get more done when I'm focused on it at the last minute. Well, that's great. That's also called procrastination. Okay, right here, recovering procrastinator, recovering addiction to urgency, and I don't think I've recovered. Like, I do a lot of this, so I'm speaking from personal experience here. The urgency addiction is real, and the concept is simple. If you think about things that are important before they are urgent, and you complete them while they're important before they are urgent, they'll never get to the urgent stage. Now, some things come across your desk as tasks you need to do that immediately are both urgent and important. And you've got to do those things right away. And so those are things when you look at your to-do list, if it's urgent and important, it has to happen. If it's not urgent and not important, now you might think about that and say, well, wait a second. If something is not urgent and it's not important, then why am I doing it? Well, sometimes it's called recreation. Okay. Sometimes it is flipping through TikTok. Sometimes it's watching TV. Now, some people will say, well, those things are important. They might be. It might be that watching TV with your spouse is something that's important to your relationship because it's time that you spend together. So that makes it important. But for the most part, things in that category are things that A, you should probably minimize what you're doing, or B, figure out, hey, maybe they don't belong in this category because they really are important for another reason. So that category is easy, not urgent, not important. Try and minimize those at all costs. Urgent and important, that's easy. You have to do it. It's the things that are important but not urgent, and the things that are urgent but not important that people struggle with. So first of all, if it's urgent but not important, then it must be important and urgent to somebody that you report to. Think about that for a minute. If your boss, if your number one client came to you and said, hey, I need this done now. I need you to go pick up my kids at soccer and deliver them to the dance recital. Well, first of all, that is not important to you. But to your boss, to your number one client, whoever it is that you're serving in that example, it's urgent and important to them. Therefore, it's urgent to you. Now, one can argue, well, it's important to me because it's important to them. But that's an example where, hey, if things are urgent but not important, there's something broken. There's something broken in your prioritization. There's something broken in the workflow. So think about those things. There should be very few things that go into that category of urgent but not important. It's the important but not urgent that all too often gets procrastinated. It gets pushed off until tomorrow because, well, yeah, It's important for me to stay in contact with my best referral partners. It's important to me to record this podcast. It's important to me to follow up on the client that I talked to yesterday to see if they had any questions about the numbers we went over yesterday. All of those things are important to my business. They're not urgent. If I didn't do this podcast, I doubt you're going to call me and say, oh my gosh, John, you missed an episode of your podcast. I'm happy and lucky you're watching and listening. I'm not counting on the fact that you're paying so close of attention to my release schedule that you're going to be upset that I didn't release a podcast. So that's something important, but not urgent, which means I can easily not do it until I end up in a place where I don't have enough business coming in the door. And then it becomes urgent of, oh my gosh, I need to get my name out there. I need to get in front of people. And now it's absolutely the most important thing that I've got to do. And I become frantic. And success comes from doing the right thing, small, accurate, correct tasks, the right thing consistently over time. It doesn't happen from doing the right thing once today, and you're going to see those results tomorrow. It comes from seeds that you are planting over the long run. But planting the seed isn't urgent. If you're a farmer and you've got seeds that you need to plant, well, whether you plant them today or plant them tomorrow, doesn't really matter. They're going to pretty much be ready when it's harvest time. Whether you planted them today or tomorrow, doesn't matter. But if you keep saying I'm going to plant them tomorrow, pretty soon you end up missing planting season. I did this year. I did a good job in planting my garden, got my garden planted in early March. Last year, I planted it in May. Last year, I kept saying next weekend, next weekend, next weekend. Okay. I have a cucumber, zucchini, whatever. I don't know. One of them, squash, zucchini. I have a zucchini squash that is just about ready to be picked. Okay. And that's because I've had planted these 2 months ago. But that was not urgent at that time. The truth is, planting a garden isn't urgent at any point in time. I kind of question how much money you spend to plant a garden so that I can save $1 on buying a zucchini squash at the store. But it's the idea. It's the idea that if you postpone something that is important long enough, it finally becomes urgent and important, and now it's a fire drill. And so are you addicted to urgency? Are you waiting to perform tasks until the time at which it becomes critical, until the time that somebody is upset at you? And if so, you've got to focus on better planning. You've got to focus on better time and task management. There is a lot that comes into managing a calendar. There is a lot that comes into managing your time. And do you put things on a to-do list? I am not a fan of a to-do list because a to-do list says do it at some point in time. I'm a fan of putting something on the calendar that is scheduled. If I have a to-do, I need to schedule time to do it. Maybe it's a to-do that I know is going to take me 3 hours to do. And so I'm going to schedule it 2 weeks from now. But that's called big rocks, scheduling the things that are the biggest tasks first, because there's always room to fit little tasks in between. So make sure you're not focused on urgency. Make sure you're not filling your day only with tasks that are urgent and important, but pre-fill part of your day with tasks that are both urgent, because you have to do that, but pre-fill it on tasks that are important before they become urgent. All right, that wraps it up for the first segment. Hang tight after this brief commercial break, and then I'm going to come back and talk about property types, because as you're thinking about growing your real estate portfolio, you might see a great deal on a manufactured home, and you might say, man, I think that's a great way to go. Well, you need to understand the difference and how lending looks at it, and you also have to look at the difference on appreciation, on how the market looks at it. So stick around after this commercial, and I'll talk to you all about it. Hey, business owners, I want to pause today's show to remind you about my Alt Doc loan program. If you're looking to buy a primary home, a second home, or a rental property, and you've thought, I got to show more profit on my tax returns so that I can qualify for a mortgage, you are doing it wrong. All you're doing is setting yourself up for failure by owing more money to the IRS in the long term. Instead, use my Alt Doc loan program. I can qualify you using the deposits into your bank statements. I can use your P&L or your 1099. I can even sometimes use the assets you have in the bank as qualifying assets. So if you are in this position, reach out to me. Call us at 85 Loan King. That's 855-626-5464, or go to 85loanking.com/altdoc. Hello, friends. Welcome back. So the second half of my podcast, we are going to be talking about property types. Now, there is a whole range of property types, and I'm going to give you the basic understanding of it and then talk about each one just basically to give you a glimpse into what that means in both buying and owning that type of property. So I'm going to start with the most common, which is a single family home. So that's the gold standard. When you're talking about buying property, most people are talking about buying a single family home. Now, nowadays, that might have an ADU in the back, an accessory dwelling unit, but that still is considered a single family home. From there, we move up the chain of units and we get to duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes. So a single family home is a gold standard. A 2, 3, or 4 unit property, those are all pretty much considered residential multifamily. In the mortgage world, we look at those as a higher risk level. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac set the risk criteria, and they say, look, the average person wants to live in a single family home. And so if the market starts to slow down, you are looking at 2, 3, and 4 unit properties are usually investor owned. Sometimes they're occupied, one of the units by the owner, and then the other units are rented. But generally speaking, 2, 3, and 4 unit properties are investor owned. And they say, what if the market starts to slow down? Investors are the first ones to walk away from properties because it's a business. There's not an emotional attachment to the property. When you live in your primary home, there's an emotional attachment. You're going to be less likely to let that property go compared with a business, an investment where you're losing money on it. So we learned that in the Great Recession back in 2007 and 2008, when a lot of people let go of investment properties, and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac tightened up their guidelines. They won't go any higher in units than a 4 unit property. So when it comes to residential multifamily, 4 is the highest that we go. We typically require larger down payments and higher interest rates. Now, if you live in the property, you can often do a lower down payment and get lower interest rates, as little as 3.5% to 5% down payment. But it doesn't change the fact that it's a higher risk to the lending world. Because if you can't afford to continue making the payment and we take it back in foreclosure, we have to look at what is the market acceptance, how many people out there in the general market are going to want to buy it. And most families, most individuals buying a home for them to live in don't want to live next door or connected to their tenant. It's not common. And so although it makes for great house hacking, it doesn't make for great common, traditional, expected buyers to want to do that. Therefore, it's harder for us to resell in a down market. And that's what we're worried about. Now, once you go bigger than 4 units, there's a new area of non-QM loans or non-qualified mortgages, which means we don't look at what Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac look at. We look at what the private market will accept. And we can typically go from 5 to 8 units, sometimes all the way up to 10. And here's the cool thing. We can also do mixed use if it is retail, a residential, or office space, and at least 51% of the space is residential. So you could literally have a 3-story building, the first floor being offices, second and third floor is 3 units per floor. So you have 6 units of residential space, 2/3 of the overall space. And then the ground floor is 1 unit, 1/3 of the space being being office or retail or restaurant. And I can do a loan on that. And all I care about is the rental income on the property. You're going to have higher interest rates on these. You're going to have larger down payments, typically at least 25%, sometimes even 30% down, but those options exist. Once you get above 10 units, you're in the era of commercial lending. So now you're going to a commercial bank. They're looking at a different set of criteria. They value the property different. When you're looking at appraisals for all the loans that I do, including all the way up to these 10-unit properties, I'm using the comparable sales approach, which means I'm looking at what have other similar properties sold for recently. Well, if that one sold for $1 million and yours is a little bit bigger and a little bit better, then the appraiser makes an adjustment and says, then yours would sell for $1,050,000. And that's the comparable approach. When you're looking at actual commercial loans, they use the net income approach. So they're looking at how much income will it generate. They don't care how much the last one sold for. They care about how much income it will generate, and that determines the value. Sometimes that's good news. Sometimes that's bad news. but it takes an entirely different approach. They're also looking at you as a business versus, for me, I'm looking at you as an individual. So you don't have to have a business setup. You don't have to have business history and business credit. And so it's a different way of looking at it. Neither is better or worse. But as you start getting into larger units, you start looking at being more like commercial property and less like residential. But right now it can go all the way up to 10 units, 8 for sure, and in most cases 10, as long as they're residential or less than half of it being restaurant, retail, or office space. Okay, now let's go the other direction. What other direction, John? Well, if you start with single family residences, we went up to larger units. Now let's move towards townhomes, condominiums, and manufactured homes. Okay, so a townhome is multiple single family homes that might be connected, but they don't share any space on top of each other, and they are recorded as separate units. It's typically called a planned unit development. So a townhome, if the unit next door to you burns down, that sucks if both of your units burn down and they don't have insurance, well, you can still rebuild yours because they're next to each other. They're not stacked on top of each other. Versus a condominium. So with a townhome, like a single family home, you own the ground beneath you usually. You own the air above you usually for a single family home, for a townhome, for all of the other properties. But for a condominium, you don't. You don't own the ground beneath you. You don't own the space above you. You simply own the box of what your unit is, which is why you can stack those boxes on top of each other. But here's the problem. With a condominium, if the building burns down and the guy beneath you doesn't have adequate insurance, you can't build yours floating in the air above his. So therefore, his has to get rebuilt. At least the exterior envelope of his has to get rebuilt, which is why with condominiums, the HOA almost always covers at least the insurance for the entire structure and the outside envelope of your unit, so that that structure can be rebuilt with the unit below you and then yours getting built right on top of it. It doesn't typically cover the actual interior walls. It doesn't cover the cabinets. It doesn't cover the sink and the toilet through the HOA's insurance, typically, because they say, hey, we can rebuild the unit above even if you don't have a toilet in your unit. So you need to carry walls in coverage. You need to carry insurance that protects you to rebuild the interior of the unit, and your mortgage company is typically going to require that. Now, between condominiums, townhomes, single family, and 2 to 4 units, all of those are handled through conventional lending, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, VA, USDA. They also can be handled through the private market of non-qualified mortgages. When we get greater than 4 units, or we get into manufactured homes, the next segment I'm going to talk about, if a manufactured, well, first of all, greater than 4 units is private money. Manufactured homes might be private money. It might be regular money, depending upon whether the manufactured home is permanently secured to the foundation and you own the land underneath. And it has to be officially recorded as real estate, like lots of steps that have to happen. If all of those steps are not perfected, or if you don't own the land underneath it, you're renting space in a park, then it's called a chattel loan. Chattel is an industry term for a loan against a manufactured home, a tiny home, anything like that, where it's physically sitting on the property land. It's connected to the land. It's got hardwired electrical and utilities, but it's not recorded as real estate. You may or may not own the land underneath. Usually you don't. Those loans are way more expensive in interest rate. Now, manufactured homes are higher interest rates even when they're secured to the ground and they're recorded as real estate. Even if we're doing a conventional Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, VA loan, you're typically looking at higher risk on manufactured homes because there isn't the general market appeal. Same concept as I said about multifamily. As a matter of fact, condos have higher interest rates too. The only loan programs you get the best rates on are townhomes and single family homes. You buy duplexes to fourplexes, higher rate, even through conventional loans. 5 unit to 10 unit, definitely higher rate because that's private money. We go down the path, townhomes, you get exactly the same interest rates. Condominiums, higher rates. Condos are harder to resell. They're typically the last to go up in an improving market and the first to decline in a declining market. And manufactured homes are even worse. Manufactured homes typically are even less attractive than condominiums, or sometimes maybe even on par. And so manufactured homes, even if you're owning the land and it is permanently secured and titled that way, you're paying a higher interest rate. And if you don't own the land, you're paying a significantly higher interest rate for manufactured homes. So I covered a whole lot high level. In future episodes, I'll talk more about different property types and strategies related to those property types. But I want to get this out there as just a basic primer of the scale and the scope of the different property types and how the lending world looks at it, so that you can use that as a base of knowledge as I teach you more in future episodes about how to capitalize on all of these different property types based upon what your investment strategy is. Thanks, everybody, for listening. If you like the podcast, please share it with anybody and everybody that you know. I'm looking to obviously grow my viewership. And if you are so inclined, I would love for you to leave a review on whatever podcast site you're listening to this to. Until next week, hope you have an absolutely wonderful week, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.